concert with their Russian counterparts a half a world away at the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Korolyov outside of Moscow, are ready to support the launch in just 25 and a half minutes from now of a Russian Soyuz 2.1A booster, which stands fully fueled on Launch Pad 6 on Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan to send an unpiloted Progress cargo ship on a fast-track to-orbit journey to deliver almost 3 tons of supplies to the residents of the International Space Station. Welcome to our coverage of the launch of the ISS Progress 76 spacecraft from that Central Asian launch site in Baikonur. The weather today is clear, with temperatures approaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit, ideal conditions for the launch. The 3-stage Soyuz booster was fueled for launch about 4.5 hours ago. The countdown has proceeded at Baikonur in smooth fashion. Everything is in readiness for this launch and the expedited trip of the Progress to the International Space Station. At the time of launch, the station and its 5 occupants will be flying 259 miles over the border between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Just 41 seconds after launch, the International Space Station will pass directly over the Cosmodrome and will leapfrog past the Soyuz booster and its Progress resupply craft as they climb to their own preliminary orbit in pursuit of the orbital outpost. The Progress is loaded with almost 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the station's crew members. The breakdown of that cargo consists of 1,102 pounds of propellant, 220 pounds of oxygen and air, 926 pounds of water, and 3,351 pounds of spare parts and experiment hardware. On Monday, the Soyuz booster with the Progress spacecraft, encapsulated in the upper stage of the rocket, rolled out the short distance from its integration hangar at Site 31 in Baikonur to the launch pad, where it was elevated vertically to its launch position, enabling engineers to hook up fuel and power lines for the final phase of launch preparations. Again, the rocket was fueled with its propellant for the 3 stages of its journey to the International Space Station about 4.5 hours ago. Everything has proceeded on track in Baikonur. Here in Houston, the flight control team, led by Flight Director Chris Edelin, has given a go to their counterparts in Moscow for the launch, which is now scheduled just over 23 minutes from now. It has been a busy time for the crew on the International Space Station. The final spacewalk in a suite of 4 spacewalks by Chris Cassidy, the ISS commander, and flight engineer Bob Behnken took place on Tuesday to continue a series of upgrades to International Space Station systems. Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken are in the process now of preparing to depart the International Space Station, with their undocking from the station in the Endeavour Crew Dragon spacecraft scheduled for Saturday night, August 1st, after 9 eventful weeks on the complex, following their historic launch May 30th on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Their parachute-assisted splashdown, which will be the first splashdown by U.S. astronauts since Tom Stafford, Vance Brand, and Deke Slayton returned from the Apollo-Soyuz mission 45 years ago tomorrow, is planned for Sunday afternoon, August 2nd. You just saw a moment ago a picture of the crew on board the International Space Station, the 5 residents led by Station Commander Chris Cassidy, joined on board by Russian cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner, and of course the Demo 2, as it is known by its nomenclature, crew that launched on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket on May 30th and arrived on the station on May 31st. Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, who will ride the Crew Dragon spacecraft back to a splashdown on August 2nd, weather permitting. The milestones for the 8-minute 46-second ride to orbit for the Progress resupply craft will consist of a liftoff that is scheduled at 9:26 and 22 seconds a.m. Central Time, 10:26:22 Eastern Time, which will be 7:26 and 22 seconds p.m. at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan about an hour before sunset. About 1 minute and 58 seconds after launch, the first stage will separate. The strap-on solid rocket boosters will fall away. The first stage will separate. The launch shroud will be jettisoned about a minute later at the 3-minute, 3-second mark into the flight. That will be followed at the 4-minute, 37-second mark by second stage shutdown and separation. The third stage skirt will be jettisoned at about 4 minutes and 57 seconds into the flight, and that will lead to a third stage shutdown and orbital insertion at the 8-minute, 46-second mark. At the time of spacecraft separation, just a few seconds later, the commands will be sent to unfurl the two solar arrays on the Progress 76 cargo craft, as well as its navigational antennas and its external television camera. At the time of launch, the International Space Station will be just 326 miles behind the Soyuz. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it will leapfrog past the Soyuz during ascent, and then the chase will be on for the Progress to catch up to the station in this expedited two-orbit rendezvous that will result in a automated docking to the Pirs docking compartment less than 4 hours after launch. At the time of spacecraft separation, 8 minutes and 46 seconds after launch, the Progress and the International Space Station will be flying over southern Russia, north of the border with Mongolia, with the International Space Station almost 1,100 statute miles ahead of Progress. A series of pre-programmed engine firings will raise the Progress's altitude to match that of the International Space Station, and then a series of engine firings will fine-tune its path to the International Space Station, with docking scheduled at 12:47 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, 1:47 p.m. Eastern Time. At the launch site in Baikonur, telemetry is being processed from the Progress spacecraft to the flight control team in Korolyov. Everything continues to go very smoothly. The launch itself through spacecraft separation will be controlled from the blockhouse down in Baikonur. At the time of spacecraft separation, flight control will be transferred to the team of engineers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow. About 15 minutes ago, the gantry arms surrounding the spacecraft on the launch pad at Site 31 in Baikonur were lowered. There are two service umbilicals that are buttressed up against the side of the Soyuz booster. The first of those umbilicals will retract at about the T-minus 33-second mark. The second umbilical will retract at about the T-minus 12-second mark, and that will initiate the engine start sequence that will result in the turbo pumps coming up to flight speed and the hold down arms being retracted to induce liftoff and the start of this two-orbit journey for the Progress to reach the International Space Station. Launch now 17.5 minutes from now. The Progress is now on autonomous power. Everything is proceeding on track, and by the timeline, no issues being reported down in Baikonur. The International Space Station is currently traveling just over the west coast of Africa, moving from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. On board the International Space Station, a busy day of activity for the crew, led by Station Commander Chris Cassidy, as he and his crewmates work through a variety of science research investigations, as well as preparations for the return of Doug Hurley and Bob Bankin on the Crew Dragon spacecraft coming up, currently scheduled for Sunday, August 2nd. This view now from a camera in the balcony of the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov. as the flight control team there, which is in control of the Progress's journey to the International Space Station today, watches over their console data and interacts with the launch control team down at the Cosmodrome. Site 31 is where all Soyuz launches are taking place at the current time until refurbishment is made to the launch site 1, that's called Gagarin's Start, the launch pad from which Yuri Gagarin launched to become the first human to fly in space on April 12th, 1961. That launch pad is undergoing some significant refurbishment to accommodate future launches, should be back in the mix in a couple of years to support dual launch operations off of 2 launch pads down in Baikonur. We're coming up on about the 15-minute mark until launch. Everything is very quiet on the loops. No issues reported from the blockhouse down in Baikonur as the countdown continues for the liftoff at 9:26:22 Central Time, which again is 7:26 and 22 seconds p.m. at the Cosmodrome, half a world away. The final minutes of the countdown will include milestones such as the T-minus 7-minute mark. A launch key is inserted into at the launch bunker, a real key that transitions the launch sequence into automatic mode. At the T-minus 5.5-minute mark, the launch conductor down at Baikonur will report that the range is clear and the Soyuz rocket is ready to begin its journey. At about the T-minus 4-minute mark, onboard systems will be switched to autonomous control. That will be followed by the booster tanks being pressurized for flight, optimizing the flow of fuel, helping structural support to the rocket as it sits on the launch pad for the final couple of minutes of the countdown. The ground propellant feed to the first stage of the Soyuz booster will be terminated at about the T-minus 1-minute 30-second mark, and the Soyuz will go on internal power. The booster itself will go on internal power at about the T-minus 1-minute mark. Just a note, once the Progress reaches its preliminary orbit, we will sign off after confirmation of solar array and navigational antenna deploy, and we'll be back on the air at 12 noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for rendezvous and docking coverage as the Progress makes its autonomous journey to the International Space Station for a link-up to the Pirs docking compartment, with docking scheduled at 12:47 p.m. Central Time, 1:47 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon. The Progress, this particular Progress, is scheduled to remain at the International Space Station until early December. Being docked to the Pirs docking compartment, we'll put 2 Progress resupply ships at the station. The other one is linked to the aft port of the Zvezda service module, the ISS Progress 75 cargo craft. This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, everything proceeding on track for the launch of the Progress 76 cargo craft just about 10 minutes from now. Everything proceeding on track. We'll be receiving video from the launch site as we get closer to the T0 mark of 9:26:22 Central Time. Again, the weather is mostly clear, just a few low scattered clouds at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, temperatures around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything is in great shape. The Progress is on autonomous power. The Soyuz booster, the 2.1A booster, fully fueled, with fueling operations having begun about 5 hours ago. Once again, the Progress is carrying 2.7 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the 5 residents of the International Space Station, 1,102 pounds of propellant, 220 pounds of oxygen and air, 926 pounds of water, and 3,351 pounds of dry goods, meaning supply hardware, spare parts, experiment hardware, and other items such as clothing for the crew. Coming up on the 8-minute mark until launch. This view now of the launch pad at the Baikonur Cosmodrome on Site 31. 7.5 minutes until liftoff. We're coming up on the point at which the launch key will be inserted in the launch bunker by the launch conductor, transitioning the launch sequence into automatic mode. And confirmation from the blockhouse in Baikonur that the launch key now has been inserted. The next milestone will be confirmation that the range at Baikonur is clear and the Soyuz rocket is ready to begin its journey. Once again, a good look at the strap-on solid rocket boosters on the first stage of the Soyuz, venting the liquid oxygen. Again, fully fueled, ready to launch in less than 5.5 minutes.
Station Moscow on space to ground 1 for Ivan and MPEG test.
Inside 5 minutes until launch, everything proceeding on track. Strip chart recorders in the Launch Control Center, which is recording telemetry, up and running. Fuel lines about to be purged. The fuel line purging of the rocket engines are purged with nitrogen to fireproof them by removing vapors of fuel and oxidizer. Again, the International Space Station will pass directly over the Baikonur Cosmodrome 41 seconds after launch and will fly past the ascending Soyuz booster rocket. So at the time of third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation, 8 minutes and 46 seconds after launch, the International Space Station will be leading the progress by almost 1,100 statute miles. Inside 3.5 minutes until launch, a key to the drainage position at the launch site has been turned into the correct position. The valves through which evaporated or gaseous oxygen escapes from the fuel tanks into the atmosphere are closed, and fuel is now draining back into the tanks to maintain the correct weight of the vehicle. The valves also provide liquid oxygen for replenishment that has been lost by the boil-off of liquid oxygen that you've been seeing at the launch pad. And the fuel and oxidizer tanks on the first stage are now being pressurized to optimize the fuel flow as we are inside 3 minutes until launch. Inside 2 minutes until launch, this view of the Soyuz 2.1A booster. Encapsulated in the upper stage is the Progress 76 cargo craft with almost 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the International Space Station. Less than a minute until launch. We're standing by for the retraction of the first umbilical that will come at about the T-minus 35-second mark. The Soyuz booster now on internal power. The first umbilical has now been retracted. When the second umbilical retracts, that will initiate the launch sequence. The engine starts sequencing. 13 seconds until launch. The launch command has been issued. There goes the second umbilical. The engine start sequence has been initiated. We have engine start. Turbo pumps now coming up to flight speed. Now at maximum thrust. Now ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the 76th Progress resupply craft heading for the express lane to the International Space Station. Good roll, pitch, and yaw program are in. Progress heading out to the northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to catch up to the International Space Station. The station now passing directly over the Baikonur Cosmodrome. All vehicle parameters reported to be stable from the blockhouse in Baikonur. Good pressure reported in the engine chambers. Yaw, pitch, and roll, all nominal, according to the launch conductor at Baikonur. Liftoff occurred right on time at 9:26:22 a.m. Central Time, 7:26:22 p.m. in Baikonur. One minute, 27 seconds into the flight, everything reported proceeding normally. This view now from a camera on the upper stage of the Soyuz 2.1A booster. We're about 10 seconds away from booster shutdown and first stage separation. And there are the boosters now separated. Structural parameters continue to be normal. The Soyuz now being thrust towards its preliminary orbit for the Progress resupply craft on the power of the second stage engines. Two minutes, 50 seconds into the flight, everything proceeding in great fashion so far. No issues reported from the blockhouse in Baikonur. The vehicle reported to be stable. And there is the jettisoning of the launch shroud. Great view from the upper stage camera on the Soyuz 2.1A booster. The next milestone will be second stage shutdown at the 4-minute 37-second mark, about 1 minute from now. This now animation being generated from the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov as we pass the 4-minute mark into the flight. The second stage continues to burn in nominal fashion at the 4.5-minute mark into the flight. We are standing by now for second stage shutdown and separation. And second stage shutdown is confirmed. And separation. And the third stage is up and running. The Progress resupply ship now heading towards its preliminary orbit on the singular power of the third stage engine, 5 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Once again, this view from a camera on the upper stage of the Soyuz, the third stage engine up and running in good shape at the 6-minute mark into the flight. We're about 2 minutes and 45 seconds away from the Progress entering its preliminary orbit. Six and a half minutes into the flight, everything proceeding on track. Good engine performance from the third stage of the Soyuz booster. We are about 2 minutes away from the completion of the Progress's journey to its preliminary orbit. The International Space Station is now in front of the Progress. At the time of third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation, the station and its 5 residents will be about 1,100 miles ahead of Progress. The vehicle reported to be rock steady and stable as it continues its climb uphill at the 7.5-minute mark into the flight. The reports from the blockhouse in Baikonur continue to be good. Good structural stability. Good orbital parameters so far. Having passed the 8-minute mark into the flight, the Soyuz booster traveling almost 15,000 miles an hour, 125 miles in altitude, 860 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Eight and a half minutes into the flight, just a few seconds away from third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. Third stage shutdown confirmed and spacecraft separation confirmed, right on time. Now standing by for solar array deployment. And the command to deploy the arrays having been issued, and you can see them having been deployed. Navigational antennas now deployed. All appendages, as they are called, have been deployed. The solar arrays, the navigational antennas, the external television camera. So the Progress is now in its preliminary orbit, having completed a flawless climb to orbit following an on-time launch from Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. A view of the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow. Those flight controllers now in control of the journey of the Progress to the International Space Station. This is a quick two-orbit rendezvous. The Progress atop the Soyuz 2.1A booster launched into a narrow 15-degree corridor, a very tight corridor to accommodate a precise pinpoint path to its preliminary orbit, to place the Progress on a precise course to the International Space Station. A series of engine firings now will follow over the course of the next couple of hours to raise the altitude of the resupply craft and to fine-tune its path as we move toward the vicinity of the International Space Station. And this view from the external television camera on the Progress 76 cargo craft that you're familiar with, showing the data that will be instrumental in flight controllers assessing the path of the Progress to its automated docking to the Piers docking compartment a few hours from now. The lower left-hand corner in this quadrant view from the external TV camera will ultimately show the distance from the Progress to the station and its rate of closure in meters per second. Again, everything went by the book in this morning's launch of the Progress to the International Space Station, a flawless climb to orbit on the Soyuz 2.1A booster, and its arrival in its preliminary orbit. Back here in Mission Control in Houston, in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers monitored the launch of the Progress and its climb to its preliminary orbit, now working in tandem with their Russian flight control counterparts at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. That'll wrap up our launch coverage for this morning. We will be back on the air in about 2 hours and 20 minutes at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for live coverage of the rendezvous and automated docking of the Progress to the International Space Station. In the meantime, that wraps up our launch coverage for now. This is Mission Control Houston.